Everything that is sustainable presents an original podcast series. Everything is connected, written and directed by Giacomo and Matilde.
Welcome to this first episode.
Today's trending topic is the pandemic of Covid-19. Most of us are locked down, following measures from our governments desperately trying to control this worldwide virus. To us, it was obvious that this pandemic was a result of the insanity of this world, where it is possible for planes to fly between Paris and New York around 50 times a day, or as the fact that in Europe we import 95% of our soya, mostly from the Americas.
Our world is just so interconnected that it is evident that a highly contagious virus could spread so easily.
Therefore, on the one hand, we started to make some research for a possible link between the spreading of a virus like Covid-19 and pollution. On the other hand, we wanted also to understand if there's a positive impact of this virus on the environment. But let's focus on the first point. How comes that air pollution contributed to the spreading of Covid-19?
Since I was born in Lombardy, I thought that analyzing one of the worst cases of Covid-19 could have given us some interesting insights. And this has proven to be true. According to a recent position paper of the SIMA, the Italian Society of Environmental Medicine, Covid-19 sticks to PM10 and PM2.5 flying around in full breach of the social distancing rules. This means that in polluted areas the virus can spread faster and further.
Wait a sec, let's explain what's PM. Particulate matter are microscopic particles of solid or liquid matter. They have impact on climate and are the most harmful form of air pollution, due to their ability to penetrate deep in the lungs and bloodstreams unfiltered. Their sources can be natural, such as volcanoes or dust storms, or caused by human activities, like the burning of fossil fuels in vehicles or even power plants. The particles called PM10 are the one with a diameter between 10 and 2.5 micrometers, and the one called PM2.5 are the fine particles with a diameter of less than 2.5 micrometers.
SIMA's paper is based on a previous study conducted by the universities of Beijing, Shanghai, and San Diego that has proved that around 4% of PM10 and PM2.5 is composed by viruses, meaning that air pollution is the perfect carrier for viruses, even on long distances. SIMA's researchers were looking for traces of SARS-CoV-2, yes, this is the official name of our virus, in particulate matter, and they finally found them in Lombardy, the most polluted region of Italy and the most affected by Covid-19.
Why is Lombardy this polluted?
Because it is a rich and overpopulated region where intensive animal farming, transportation, and industrial activities are putting pressure on the environment. In winter, pollution reaches its peak due to domestic heating and manure treatment in agriculture.
Which is?
It's an activity consisting in distributing animals' feces on the soil in order to fertilize it. An activity that is allowed only in winter according to the regional law. Regulations on the topic, indeed, are very strict because manure can pollute the air and the groundwater. In Lombardy, the peak of manure distribution on fields is reached every year in February. A consolidated trend shows us that January and February are also the most polluted months of the year in the same region. This is most likely due to manure spraying operations that are carried out in an illegal way, causing the dispersion in the air of ammonia, which otherwise should be laid on the soil to avoid aerosol. Once in the air, ammonia constitutes particulate matter, therefore contributing to the spreading of viruses.
Just to make what we just said easier, basically it has been proven that around 4% of particulate matter is made out of viruses. On this basis, Italian researchers are confident that the spread of Covid-19 has been boosted by air pollution. In the same period when the virus arrived in Italy, air pollution was at its annual peak.
Exactly, and it is not just a coincidence that the peak of pollution happened simultaneously with the manure aerosol performed by farmers in the region. We can confidently argue that industrial and domestic heating, transportation, and illegal agricultural practices have substantially contributed to this pandemic in an overpopulated area.
But there's more. Confirmed by a North American paper, we're starting to understand that through exposure to particulate matter, we are more likely to have very severe symptoms and even to die from Covid-19.
Indeed, this study, which data were collected from more than 3,000 US counties, shows that a small increase in long-term exposure to PM2.5 leads to a large increase in Covid-19 death rate. If you're interested in learning more about this, you can check out the episode's description with the links to all the studies we mentioned.
We We understood that pandemics and pollution are strongly linked, and this connection, funny enough, works both ways. Confinement measures are actually positively impacting the environment. This is a perfect example of serendipity. Taking care of human health is producing a far more valuable result, a decrease in air pollution.
The so-called happy accident.
And in our case, it's even more ironic because that was the cause of the problem itself. Let's go back to our first example, would you?
Lombardy, my home region. Here, the Regional Environmental Agency, ARPA, published a preliminary study confirming that air pollution is decreasing as lockdown measures are implemented. If a strong trend has not been found yet for the decrease in concentration of PM in the atmosphere, researchers are running tests that show that the PM concentration would be much higher in this period of time if stay-home measures were not taken. But we have to keep in mind, as we mentioned before, that animal farming is an important source of PM, and this activity has not been touched at all by the lockdown measures. On the other hand, a significant trend has been detected for what concerns nitrogen dioxide and benzene concentration that are dropping dramatically.
This is a direct result of the traffic ban that the health crisis has imposed.
Correct. Cars indeed are the first responsible for the emission of these two molecules, which concentration in the atmosphere has never been this low in Lombardy for years.
Pollution is actually decreasing everywhere lockdown measures are taken. This is true for Europe as well as for China and elsewhere. But before to deepen in this topic, it might be better to explain what nitrogen dioxide and benzene are.
Nitrogen dioxide and benzene are molecules which high concentration in the atmosphere is due to human activities, such as certain industrial processes and motor vehicles emission. The two are toxic to humans and can cause a variety of respiratory problems. We know for a while now that pollution is responsible for about 16% of all deaths worldwide. Covid-19 adds up to a situation in which our respiratory systems are already weakened.
As I was saying, there's less and less nitrogen dioxide all over Europe. We know this with a certain precision thanks to the 30 satellites coordinated by the Copernicus program, check it out, which main aim is to monitor pollution and climate change. According to the European Space Agency, nitrogen dioxide concentration have dropped of about 50% in otherwise very polluted areas like Milan or Paris. And on the European scale, we can actually see a trend in PM decrease. Finally, the same trend has been detected in China as well, where PM 2.5 has diminished of around 20 to 30% due to the restrictive measures that the government has implemented.
If you're interested, you can amuse yourselves with a PM concentration simulator on the Copernicus website. You can find the link in the script of this podcast available on our website www.etism.org. Here's a fun fact. Pollution is decreasing, the environment thanks us, and animals are finally taking back cities. Or not. The internet was invaded by viral posts showing animals in unusual places in cities around the world, suggesting that nature is regenerating. Like in Venice, where a popular tweet announced that for the first time ever we can see swans, fish, and even dolphins in the channels.
Unfortunately, it takes years for an ecosystem to restore and for animal population to grow and spread again. Swarms are common in certain areas of Venice. The dolphins were photographed in Sardinia, and fish were visible because the reduction in boat traffic makes the waters clearer.
Let's go back to the ARPA study we mentioned before. It lists the causes of the decline in air pollution, showing that the traffic ban is the first contributor. In fact, the implementation of the ban was responsible for the drop of motor vehicles traffic of 75% during weekdays, reaching an astonishing 90% on Sunday.
Impressive.
The demand for electricity also decreased substantially, a trend that is not only visible in Lombardy, but also on the national scale, starting from the 9th of March, when the lockdown measures entered into force. This is due to the closures of public offices, shops, and in part of industries. Similar trends are recorded all over the world where restrictive measures have been taken. Meanwhile, most of the industries and the agricultural sector are still running and polluting at their normal pace in order to feed us and produce essential goods. However, intensive animal farming is responsible for as much the emissions of greenhouse gases as the whole transportation sector.
Meat production is indeed a highly polluting process, which industrialization is responsible for environmental disasters globally. And we're talking about deforestation in order to feed livestock, water pollution due to manure treatment, air pollution because animals release methane, nitrogen dioxide, and other polluting gases in the atmosphere. Animal farming is draining lakes, polluting rivers, seas, and groundwaters. It is one of the first causes of biodiversity loss worldwide.
What's the point here? We have seen how this pandemic is positively impacting our environment. This is great, but experts agree on the fact that it won't last long. Once the stay-home measures will be over, transportation will go back to its normal pace, injecting carbon dioxide and nitrogen dioxide in the atmosphere, damaging our respiratory systems and our environment. However, some researchers from the Kyoto University are optimistic on the fact that behavioral changes towards sustainability can occur when one is obliged to deal with a restriction. They proved that when the closure of an important motorway obliged commuters to take public transportation, once the road reopened, many drivers kept commuting by train or buses, choosing public transportation instead of their private vehicles. This means that the same can happen with regards to smart working. Many enterprises and workers have been obliged to rely solely on this way of working, which reduces the emissions from commuting, especially when meetings are far away from the worker's home and require to take a plane or long distances transportation. If this behavior is kept, once the lockdown measures will be over, we could save some greenhouse gases emissions. But this works only if employers and employees had a good experience of smart working, like Japanese commuters did with public transportation. Otherwise, the old habits will be back soon.
The problem is that smart working is a viable option only for a few workers, and its impact on the environment is limited. This is why a greater change in our behavior is required. And what is the best we can do to reduce our impact on the environment? Well, it's changing our demand in food, influencing the agricultural sector that has not been touched during the Covid-19 crisis. Avoiding meat to reduce the impacts of intensive animal farming. And here it's why. First of all, because it's easy, or at least easier than avoiding to go to work. Your boss won't fire you if you become vegetarian. Secondly, you can do it starting from today, maybe just reducing your meat and dairy consumption. Thirdly, it's cheap. Meat substitutes are generally much cheaper and bring you the same amount of nutrients. And let's say it frankly, this is also an economic crisis. It's best to start saving from now. And last but not least, it is amazingly effective.
It is indeed a very effective way of fighting pollution. Researchers from the University of Oxford have proved that adopting a diet conformed to the global dietary guidelines, which means less meat than what the average person eats right now, would cut food-related emissions by 29%, a vegetarian diet by 63%, and a vegan one by 70%. And this is astonishing, knowing that food production is responsible for something like half of the emissions that the world can afford if global warming is to be limited to less than 2 degrees Celsius, as the international community committed to. Many are calling for a change in our society during this pandemic. What if the most effective way is just a change in our diets?
Because you're like a drug, like a needle in my heart, like a running running fast, I don't think about the rest.
We really enjoyed the process that brought us to the creation of this first podcast of our project Etism. Covid-19 gave us the time to think and collect a great amount of data, organize it in an interesting way, and hopefully to convince you to take action against pollution and for the preservation of our environment.
We are convinced that our behaviors can make a great difference. There is no small change. However, we have much more to tell you, starting from meat production, that will be the topic of the next podcast. If you enjoyed this, follow us for much more towards sustainability.
And do not forget to visit our website at www.etism.org. Everything that is sustainable